Hello, and welcome back to Kim Reads to continue with Misery 12. During the next 3 weeks, Paul Sheldon felt surrounded by a queer electric peacefulness. His mouth was always dry. Sound seems too loud. There were days when he felt he could bend spoons simply by looking at them. Other days he felt like weeping hysterically. Outside this, separate of the atmosphere and apart from the deep maddening rich of his healing legs, its own serene thing, the work continued. The stack of pages to the right of the royal grew steadily taller. Before this strange experience, he had considered 4 pages a day to be his optimum output. On fast cars, it had been 3, and only 2 on many days before finishing sprint. During this electric 3-week period, which came to an end with the rainstorm of April 15th, Paul averaged 12 pages a day, 7 in the morning, 5 more in an evening session. If anyone in his previous life, for so he had come to think of it without realizing it, had suggested he could work at such a pace, Paul would have laughed. When the rain began to fall, he had 267 pages of Misery's Return. First draft stuff, sure, but he had skimmed through it and thought amazingly clean at first. Part of the reason was that he was an amazingly straight life. No long, muddled nights spent bar hopping, followed by long, muddled days spent drinking coffee and orange juice and gobbling vitamin tablets. Days when if he glanced so much of his typewriter he would turn away shuddering. No more waking up to a big blonde or redhead he had picked up somewhere the night before, a lass who usually looked like a queen at midnight and a goblin at 10 the next morning. No more morning cigarettes. He had once asked him for a timid and tentative voice, and she had given him a look of such utter darkness that he had told her once to forget it. He was Mr. Clean. No bad habits, except for his codeine. Jones, of course, still haven't done anything about that, have we, Paul? No distractions. Here I am, he thought, the world's only monistic druggie. Up at 7, down 2 novel with juice. At 8 o'clock, breakfast came, served at Monsieur's bedside. A single egg, poached to scramble 3 days a week. High-fiber cereal the other 4 days. Then in the wheelchair, over to the window, find the hole in the paper, fall into the 19th century where men were men and women wore bustles. Lunch, afternoon nap, again, sometimes to edit, sometimes just to read. She had everything Somerset Maugham had ever written. Once Paul found himself wanting dourly if she had John Full's first novel on her shelves, and decided it might be better not to ask. And Paul began working his way through the 20-odd volumes that comprised Maugham's Ouvert, fascinated by the man's canny grasp of story values. Over the years, Paul had grown more and more resigned to the fact that he could not read stories he had as when he was a kid. By becoming a writer of them himself, he had condemned himself to a life of dissection. But Maugham first seduced him and then made him a child again, and that was wonderful. At 5 o'clock, she would serve him a light supper, and at 7, she would roll on the black and white television. They could watch Smash and WKRP in Cincinnati. When these were over, Paul would write. When he was done, he would roll the wheelchair slowly. He could not have gone much faster, but it was just as well that Annie would not know that over the bed. She would hear come in and help him get back to bed. More medication, boom, out like a light, and then the next day would just be the same, and the next and the next. Being such a straight arrow was part of the reason for this amazing fecundity. But Annie herself was a much bigger one. After all, her single hesitant suggestion about bee sting, which had shaped the book and given its urgency when Paul had firmly believed he could never be urgent about Misery again. He had been sure of one thing from the start. There really was no Misery's Return. His attention had been focused only on finding a way to get this bitch out of her grave without cheating, before Annie decided to inspire him by giving another enema with a handful of Jinsu knives. Minor matters such as what the fucking book was about was supposed to have to wait. During the 2 days following Annie's trips down to pay her tax bill, Paul tried to forget his failure to take advantage of what could have been a golden opportunity to escape and concentrate on getting Misery back to Mrs. Rameau's cottage instead. Take her to Jeffrey's home was no good. The servants, most notably Jeffrey's gossipy butler, or Tyler, would be seen and talk. Also, he needed to establish the total amnesia would have been caused by the shock of being buried alive. Amnesia? Shit. The chick could barely talk, sort of a relief, getting Misery's usual blurbings. So what next? The bitch was out of her grave. Now, where was the fucking story? Should Jeffrey and Mrs. Ramage tell Ian that Misery was still alive? Paul didn't think so, but he wasn't sure. Not being sure of things he knew was a charmless corner of purgatory for writers who were driving fast with no idea where they were going. Not Ian, he thought, looking out the barn. Not Ian, not yet. The doctor first. The old asshole with all the N's in his name. Shinebone. The thought of the doctor brought Annie's comment about the bee stings to mind. And not for the first time. It kept recurring at odd moments. One person in every dozen. But it wouldn't just play. Two unrelated women in need in neighborhoods, townships, both allergic to bee stings the same rare way. 3 days fall the great Danny Wilkes bailout. Paul had been drowsing his way into his afternoon nap when the guys in the sweatshop weighed in heavy. This time it wouldn't flare. This time it was an H-bomb explosion. He sat bolt upright in bed, ignoring the flare of pain which shot up in his legs. Annie, he bawled, come here. He heard her thump down the stairs 2 at a time and then run down the doorway. Her eyes were wide and scared when she went in. Paul, what's wrong? Are you cramping? Are you... No, he said, but of course he was. His mind was cramping. No, Annie, I'm sorry if I scared you, but you gotta help me in the chair. Mighty fuck. I got it. That dreaded F word was out before he could help it, but this time it didn't seem to matter. She was looking at him respectfully and not with a little awe. Here was a secular version of the Pentecostal fire burning before her very eyes. Of course, Paul. She got him in the chair as quickly as she could. She began to roll him toward the window, and Paul shook his head impatiently. That won't take long, he said, but it's important. Is it about the book? It is a book. Be quiet. Don't talk to me. Ignoring the typewriter, he never used a typewriter to take notes. He seized one of the ballpoints and quickly covered a single sheet of paper with a scrawl that probably no one himself could have read. They were related. It was the bees and affected them both the same way because they were related. Misery's an orph. Guess what? The Evelyn Hyde babe was Misery's sister, or maybe half-sister. That would probably work better. Who gets the first hint? Shinny? No, Shinny's a ninny. Mrs. R. She can go see Charles, E.H.'s mommy, and now he was stuck with the idea of such intense loveliness in terms of plot leads. They looked up, mouth open, eyes wide. Paul? Annie asked anxiously. She knew, Paul whispered. Of course she did, at least strongly suspected, but... He bent to his notes again. She, Mrs. R., once realized that Mrs. E.H. has gone to know Miss Emily She, Mrs. R., realizes at once that Mrs. E.H. has got someone to know M is related to her dot. Same hair or something. Remember, E.H.'s mom is starting to look like a major character. You'll need to work her up. Mrs. R. starts to realize Mrs. E.H. may have known Misery was buried alive. Shit on a shingle. Love it. Suppose the old lady guessed Misery was left over of fuck 'em and leave 'em days and He put the pen down, looking at the paper, and then slowly picked up the pen again, scrawled a few more lines. 3 necessary point. How does Mrs. E.H. react to Mrs. R.'s suspicions? She should be either be murderous or puked up scared. I prefer scared, but I think A.W. would like murderous. So, okay, murd. 2. How does Ian get into this? 3. Misery's amnesia. Oh, here's one to go on. Does Misery find out her mom lived with a possibility that does not one but 2 of her daughters have been buried alive and speak up? Why not? You can help me back into bed now if you want, Paul said. If I sound mad, I'm sorry. I was just excited. That's all right, Paul. She still sounded odd. Since then, the work had been driven on famously. Annie was right. The story was turning out to be a good deal more gruesome than the other Misery books. The first chapter had not been a fluke but a harbinger, but it was also more richly plotted than any other Misery novel since the first. And the characters were more lively. The 3 Misery novels have been a little more than straightforward adventures with a fair amount of piquancy described sex thrown in to please the ladies. This book, he began to understand, was a Gothic novel, and thus was more independent on plot than situation. The challenges were constant. It was just not a question of can you to begin the book for the first time in years. It was can you almost every day, and he was finding out he could. Then the rain came and things changed. That's the end of that chapter, and I'll see you later.